At the edge of the flooded ravine, the old rancher stood with his hands hanging uselessly at his sides, breath fogging the air as if the land itself were exhaling through him. The water below churned softly, a dull brown mirror broken by reeds and debris, and in its center the horse struggled no longer. She floated at an angle that felt wrong to him, her pale flank rising and falling in shallow rhythm, her mane spread across the surface like spilled milk. Every instinct told him this was too much, too dangerous. Too late. His knees ached. His chest burned. The years had taught him when to step back. He took a step anyway, then stopped. The mud sucked at his boot, greedy and cold, and memory rose with it. He saw his wife's hand slipping from his in a hospital room that smelled of antiseptic and endings. He remembered standing still then, too, afraid that any movement might make the loss real. The horse lifted her head slightly, eyes dark and glassy, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with logic. It was recognition, raw and unguarded, the look of a creature who had waited as long as she could. The water lapped higher against the bank. A branch bumped against the horse's side and drifted on. He could still turn back. He could tell himself that age was wisdom, that survival meant knowing limits, that no one would blame him. The land had taken enough from him already. His heart argued quietly, listing reasons to remain untouched by this new grief. But beneath those reasons lay a deeper truth he had avoided for years. Walking away would not spare him pain. It would only confirm the loneliness he had learned to wear like armor. He stepped fully into the ravine, gasping as icy water rushed over his ankles and calves. The cold was sharp, shocking, as if the earth itself were trying to drive him out. Each movement demanded thought. Each breath tasted of rust and silt. He reached for a fallen fence post half buried in mud and tested its strength, pressing his weight against it until it held. The horse stirred, a faint tremor running through her body, and he spoke without meaning to, a low sound carried more by breath than words. Closer now, he could see the cuts along her legs where wire had bitten deep, the way exhaustion had hollowed her ribs. She was beautiful in a way that hurt, too fragile and too strong at once. When he touched her neck, she flinched but did not pull away. The trust in that stillness cracked something open in him. He braced himself, looping a rope around her chest with fingers that refused to be steady, and pulled with a strength he did not know he still possessed. The ravine resisted. Mud dragged at his boots. Water pressed against him, heavy and relentless. Pain shot up his back, bright and blinding, and for a moment his vision narrowed until all he could see was white. He rested his forehead against the horse's wet hide and breathed, matching his rhythm to hers. They stayed like that, suspended between failure and hope, until the shaking in his arms eased and he found a new way to pull, inch by inch, surrendering pride to persistence. The horse slid forward suddenly, her weight shifting, and he nearly lost his footing. Fear surged, sharp and immediate, but beneath it came something steadier. He leaned into the rope, letting his body become an anchor, and felt the fence post dig deeper into the bank. With a final, guttural effort, he dragged her free of the deepest water. She collapsed onto the mud with a sound that felt like a sob torn from the ground itself. He fell beside her, chest heaving, face pressed into the wet earth. The sky above had brightened without him noticing, pale light filtering through thinning fog. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the horse released a breath, so deep it seemed to empty her entirely, and he answered it with one of his own. The world did not applaud. No one was there to witness this small, impossible victory that somehow made it sacred. As he lay there, pain spread through him in slow waves, but was joined by a warmth he had not felt in years. He laughed once, quietly, surprised by the sound of it. Tears followed, hot against his cold skin, blurring the edges of everything. He did not wipe them away. He let them fall where they would, into the mud, into the horse's mane, into the space between who he had been and who he might still become. Eventually, he pushed himself up and checked her breathing, her pulse. The way her eyes followed him now was something like awareness. She was alive. Not saved, not healed, but alive, and that was enough. He knew the road ahead would be long, filled with setbacks and nights where doubt would creep in like frost. He knew he would hurt again. Standing there, soaked and trembling, he understood that this was the price of choosing to care, and that it was one he was finally willing to pay. The horse took a halting step, then another, her weight leaning into the rope and into him, and he felt the fragile beginning of partnership form between them. Each movement was negotiated, patient, a conversation without language. He adjusted his pace to hers, resisting the urge to rush, learning again how to listen with his whole body. With every careful step away from the ravine, the sound of water faded behind them, replaced by the creak of leather and the soft scrape of hooves on damp soil. It was not triumph that filled him then, but a quiet resolve, steady as a heartbeat, telling him this moment would not end here. It promised change, demanded patience, and asked him to remain open despite everything he had lost. When he turned back toward the ranch, guiding the horse slowly behind him, the land looked different. The fences still leaned. The house still waited in silence. Yet the emptiness he had carried felt lighter, as if someone had been set down in the ravine with the mud and the fear. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, or how much strength he truly had left. He only knew that he had stayed, and in staying, something within him had begun, at last, to live again. Morning came without ceremony, a thin gray light seeping through the clouds and settling over the ranch like a held breath. The old rancher woke on the floor beside the stove, every joint protesting, his clothes still damp and stiff with mud. For a moment, he forgot why his body hurt so deeply. Then he heard it, the slow, uneven sound of breathing from the stall he had cleared in the barn, and memory returned all at once. He pushed himself up, steadying his balance against the table, and moved toward the door with the careful urgency of someone afraid the world might change if he hurried too fast. The barn smelled of hay, rust, and wet earth. The horse stood where it had left her, legs trembling, head low, her white coat dulled by dried mud and streaks of blood. She watched him closely, eyes sharp with caution, muscles coiled as if ready to flee despite her weakness. He stopped several steps away, sensing the fragile line between comfort and fear. He remembered how it felt to be touched after grief had made him raw, how even kindness could feel like another wound. So he waited, letting the quiet speak first. He filled a bucket with water, the pump handle creaking in complaint, and carried it slowly toward her. Each step was deliberate, announced. When he set the bucket down, she flinched but did not move away. That small mercy loosened something in his chest. He stepped back again, giving her space, and sat on an overturned crate. They regarded each other across the stall, two beings measuring whether the other might stay. Hours passed like that, marked only by shifting light and the distant call of crows. He cleaned her wounds when she allowed it, his touch tentative, apologetic. She reacted to pain with a sharp intake of breath, but she did not strike or bolt. Trust, he realized, was not a leap. It was a series of pauses, of moments where harm could have happened and did not. Each time she held still, he felt the weight of that choice settle on him, heavy and humbling. By afternoon, exhaustion claimed her. She lowered herself onto the straw with a careful grace that broke his heart, folding her legs beneath her as if she had practiced the surrender many times before. He covered her with an old blanket, threadbare but clean, and watched as her breathing eased. The simple act of keeping vigil felt like work he understood. There was no fixing here, no solving. There was only staying. He left briefly to fetch apples from the cellar, their skins wrinkled but sweet, and returned to find her awake, ears tilted toward the door. When he offered one, she sniffed it suspiciously, then took it from his palm with delicate precision. Her lips brushed the skin, warm and surprisingly gentle. The contact sent a jolt through him, not a fear, but a connection so sudden it made his eyes sting. He turned his face away, embarrassed by the intensity of his own response, and busied himself with the next apple. Night came early, clouds thickening until the world felt enclosed and intimate. He slept again on the barn floor, wrapped in his coat, waking often to check on her. Each time, she was still there, alive, breathing. Each time, relief washed through him anew. He spoke to her in the dark, not telling stories exactly, but offering fragment of thought, observations about the weather, memories that surfaced without warning. He did not know if she understood, but the sound of his own voice filled a silence that had grown too large in his life. The following days settled into a fragile rhythm. He rose sore and tired, tended her wounds, coaxed her to drink, and sat with her through long stretches of quiet. She tested him constantly, pulling back when his hand lingered too long, relaxing only when he respected the boundary. He learned her language through small signs, the twitch of an ear, the tension in her neck, the way her eyes softened when he hummed without realizing it. In learning her, he found himself paying attention to his own body again, to the way breath steadied when he slowed down, to how patience eased pain. There were setbacks. One morning she refused food, turning her head away with stubborn resolve. Panic flared in him, sharp and familiar, echoing nights spent bargaining with fate beside a hospital bed. He fought the urge to force, to plead, to demand. Instead, he waited, sitting nearby, hands resting uselessly on his knees. Eventually, hunger won and she ate. The relief left him shaking, and he laughed softly at himself, recognizing the old pattern of fear and the new discipline of restraint. Wordless understanding grew between them, stitched together by repetition and care. She began to watch for him when he left the barn, head lifting at the sound of his boots. When he returned, she greeted him with a low sound that vibrated through her chest, not quite a whinny, but close. He answered it without thinking, a mirror of her tone, and felt foolish and alive all at once. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the barn in amber light, she shifted closer to him on the straw. He froze, scarcely daring to breathe. Slowly, she extended her neck and rested her head against his shoulder, the weight of it real and trusting. The contact was brief, almost tentative, but it undid him. Tears slid down his face, unchecked, soaking into her mane. He did not apologize for them. He let them be what they were, an offering, a release. In that quiet, shared stillness, he felt something change. The ache in his chest did not vanish, but it softened, making room for something else. Purpose, perhaps, or the memory of it. He understood then that this bond was not about rescue alone. It was about learning how to remain present in the face of vulnerability, his own and another's. As darkness settled around them, he stayed where he was, shoulder bent beneath her trust, knowing this was only the beginning, and that whatever came next would demand the same courage it had taken simply to stay. The change did not announce itself. It arrived the way dawn does on the plains, quietly, almost apologetically, noticed only after the darkness had already begun to loosen its grip. On the third morning, the rancher found the gate to the barn ajar. He stood still, heart tightening, afraid of what that might mean. Then he saw her, the white horse standing just outside, nose lifted toward the pale sky, breathing the cold air as if tasting freedom rather than fleeing it. She did not run when she saw him. That was the first sign. He spoke softly, more to steady himself than to guide her, and she turned her head, ears swiveling back toward his voice. There was caution there, yes, but also curiosity. He realized then how little he had been alone these past days. The ranch, once a place of echoes and empty routines, now held a shared center of gravity. Wherever she was, his attention followed, pulled gently but insistently in her direction. As the week unfolded, the rhythm between them deepened. She began to walk the length of corral with him, matching his slow pace, stopping when he stopped. He noticed how she favored one leg, how pain flickered across her body when she thought he wasn't looking. He adjusted without comment, shortened their walks, learned when to rest. Caring for her demanded that he listen to her limits and to his own. In doing so, he found himself moving to the world with a tenderness he had once believed was gone for good. It was a neighbor boy who noticed first. The kid pedaled past the fence on his rusted bicycle, skidded to a halt, and stared openly at the horse. The rancher watched from the porch, prepared to wave him off, but the boy only smiled, wide and unguarded, and lifted a hand in greeting. The rancher returned it, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. The boy came back the next day, and the day after that, sometimes with carrot, sometimes with nothing but questions he did not always ask aloud. Soon others followed. An old veteran from down the road stopped by under pretense of borrowing tools. A woman from town left a bag of apples at the gate without knocking. No one made speeches. No one asked for explanations. They stood, watched, offered help in the form of quiet presence. The rancher felt something stir in him that felt dangerously like belonging. He did not trust it at first. Belonging, he knew, could be taken away, but it could also be built slowly through shared attention and care. The horse seemed to sense the shift as well. She watched the newcomers closely, wary but calm, and stayed near the rancher's side. When a child laughed too loudly, she startled, pressing into him until the sound faded. He rested a hand against her neck, steady and sure, and felt the tension ease from both of them. In those moments, he understood how deeply fear traveled, how easily it transferred, and how powerfully it could be soothed. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and cast long shadows across the land, a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked close enough to shake the windows, and rain hammered the roof of the barn with violent urgency. The horse panicked, eyes rolling, body trembling, memories of water and helplessness rising fast. The rancher moved instinctively, stepping into her space, murmuring low, grounding sounds. He placed his forehead against hers, breathing slowly, deliberately, offering his calm like a bridge. The storm raged, but she did not bolt. She stayed, shuddering, trusting him to hold the line between past terror and present safety. His arms burned at the effort, his heart pounded, but he did not step away. In that moment, he realized how much strength remained in him, not the brute strength of youth, but the endurance born of survival. When the thunder finally retreated and the rain softened into a whisper, she stood quietly, her breath evening out against his shoulder. That night, long after the sky cleared, he sat alone on the porch, watching the moon rise over the fields. The horse grazed nearby, free within the fence, lifting her head now and then to check on him. He thought of all the years he had spent believing his best work was behind him, that his purpose had ended with loss. The idea felt smaller now, less convincing. Purpose, he realized, was not something granted once and then taken away. It was something that returned when invited, when given room to grow. He did not know what this place might become. He only knew that it was already changing people, including himself. The land felt warmer. The nights felt less heavy. And when the horse wandered back toward the bar and paused beside him, resting her head briefly against his chest before moving on, he smiled through a familiar sting of tears. This was no longer just a rescue. It was a beginning, unfolding quietly, asking him to stay present, to remain open, and to trust that healing, once set in motion, rarely stopped with just one soul. The ranch no longer felt like a place people passed by without seeing. It had become something they slowed for, something that drew their eyes and softened their steps. Cars lingered at the fence line. Footprints appeared where none had been before. The change was subtle, almost polite, but unmistakable. Life was beginning to gather there, pulled by a quiet force that had nothing to do with intention and everything to do with need. The rancher noticed it most in the mornings. Where he once woke to silence, so complete it rang in his ears, he now heard movement. Hooves shifting the corral, birds settling on new fence posts, distant voices carried by the wind. He moved through his routines with steadier hands, pausing often to watch the horse as she explored her space. Her coat had begun to regain its luster, white brightening beneath careful grooming, though the scars along her legs remained, pale reminders of what she had endured. He did not mind them. Neither, it seemed, did she. Children came first. They approached the fence cautiously, eyes wide, hands tucked into sleeves. They did not ask to pet her. They simply watched. The horse watched back, ears flicking forward, curious but calm. The rancher stayed close, not as a guard but as a witness. He noticed how the children's shoulders lowered as minutes passed, how their breathing slowed, how laughter slipped out before they could stop it. Something about her presence invited honesty. She asked nothing. She demanded no performance. She simply was. A boy with restless hands began showing up every afternoon, lingering until the sun dipped low. He spoke little, but he brushed the horse's mane with careful strokes, counting them under his breath. The rancher listened without interrupting, understanding that the counting was a way to stay anchored. When the boy finished, he would lean against the fence, eyes unfocused, calmer than when he arrived. The rancher never asked why. Some stories needed no questions. Adults followed, drawn by the same unnamed pull. An older woman stood quietly one morning, tears sliding down her face as she watched the horse lower her head into the boy's chest. A man who had not slept well in years dozed in a folding chair near the corral, waking only when a horse's shadow crossed his face. The rancher saw the way relief settled into their bodies, the way something loosened that had been clenched too long. He recognized it because he felt it too. The horse accepted them all with the same measured grace. She did not rush forward, but she did not retreat either. She chose when to engage, when to step back, teaching boundaries without words. The rancher learned alongside her, understanding that healing was not about access, but about permission. Together, they set a tone the land seemed to follow, slow, respectful, unforced. One afternoon, a teenage girl arrived alone, shoulders hunched, eyes sharp with practiced defiance. She stayed near the gate at first, arms crossed tightly. The rancher said nothing, busy himself with mending a loose board. The horse wandered closer on her own, stopping a few feet away. The girl flinched, then laughed, a brittle sound that surprised them both. She reached out, stopped, hesitated. The horse waited. When contact finally came, it was brief, electric. The girl's breath hitched, and she turned away quickly, embarrassed by the sudden rush of feeling. She came back the next day, and the next. The rancher watched these small exchanges with a growing sense of awe. He had not planned any of this. There were no signs, no promises of transformation. Yet something was happening here, something larger than him, larger than the horse. He felt in the way people lingered after sunset, reluctant to return to whatever waited for them beyond the fence. He felt in the way the land itself seemed to breathe easier, grasses bending gently in the breeze, as if listening. One evening, as golden light stretched across the fields, the rancher stood alone at the edge of the corral. The horse approached slowly, deliberately, and stopped in front of him. She studied his face, her gaze steady and knowing. He met it without flinching. After a long moment, she stepped closer and pressed her forehead against his chest, solid and warm. The contact was grounding, unmistakable. His hands rose without thought, resting against her neck, fingers curling into her mane. Around them, the ranch hummed with quiet life. Laughter drifted from the porch. A screen door creaked. Somewhere, a radio played softly. The rancher closed his eyes, letting the moment settle into him. He understood then that what had begun as an act of desperation had become a shared language of care. This place was no longer defined by what he had lost, but by what was being restored, one presence at a time. When he opened his eyes, the horse was still there, steady and patient. He felt a swell of emotion rise, not sharp enough to overwhelm, but strong enough to carry meaning. He did not need to name it. Some truths were felt best without words. He rested his cheek briefly against her neck, breathing in the scent of hay and sun, and allowed himself to believe that this was bigger than either of them. The light faded slowly, leaving behind a sense of continuation rather than ending. The rancher remained where he was, heart full and uncertain, aware that something irreversible had taken root. Whatever this place was becoming, whatever role he was stepping into, he knew one thing with quiet certainty. He was no longer standing on the outside of life, watching it pass. He was part of it again, anchored by a bond that had grown not from grand intention, but from the simple, brave choice to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss more healing stories like this. And now, click on the video on your screen. The next story might make you cry and then help you feel whole again. Time began to move differently after that. No longer measured only by sunrise and sunset, but by the quiet markers of progress that could not be rushed. A new fence line appeared along the east pasture, built not in a single day but board by board, hands joining in without ceremony. Someone brought lumber. Someone else brought nails. The rancher accepted the help with a humility that felt unfamiliar and necessary. He no longer pretended this place was his alone. The horse stood nearby as the work unfolded, watching with calm attentiveness. She had grown stronger, her steps more certain, though she still moved with care, as if honoring the memory of pain rather than fleeing from it. Children paused their chatter when she passed. Adults lowered their voices instinctively. It was not reverence exactly, but respect, and understanding that something fragile and powerful shared the space with them. What began as occasional visits slowly shaped itself into a pattern. People arrived not just to see the horse, but be near her, to exist in her steady presence. The rancher noticed how conversations softened here, how silences no longer felt awkward. A boy who could not sit still anywhere else spent hours brushing her coat, movements slow and deliberate. A veteran who, startled at sudden noises, found himself resting against a fence, eyes closed, breathing deep and even. No one explained why it worked. It simply did. The rancher changed too, though he did not announce it. He woke earlier, not out of habit, but anticipation. He cooked more than he needed, learned who took sugar in their coffee, who preferred to stand rather than sit. His laughter returned in small, surprising bursts. At night, exhaustion came easily, the honest kind that followed meaningful effort. When he lay down, sleep no longer felt like escape. It felt earned. One afternoon, a woman arrived with her young daughter, the child clinging tightly to her hand. The girl did not speak, her eyes darting from place to place, shoulders drawn up as if bracing against an unseen storm. The rancher nodded in greeting and stepped back, letting the space speak for itself. The horse approached slowly, stopping a careful distance away. She lowered her head, breathing softly, waiting. Minutes passed. The girl's grip loosened. She took one tentative step forward, then another. When she reached out, her fingers barely grazed the horse's mane. A sound escaped her, small, startled, alive. Her mother covered her mouth, tears spilling freely. The rancher felt his chest tighten, the moment settling into him with unmistakable weight. This was not coincidence. This was continuity. That evening, as the sun burned low and red along the horizon, the rancher stood alone in the pasture, the horse beside him. He watched people leave in quiet pairs, their steps lighter than when they arrived. The land seemed to hold on to their presence, as if memorizing the shape of healing. He thought of all the years he had believed usefulness faded with age. That purpose belonged only to the strong and the young. The thought no longer fit. He rested a hand against the horse's neck, feeling the steady warmth beneath her coat. She leaned into the touch, grounding him in the present moment. In that simple exchange, understanding arrived without fanfare. This place was becoming something that would outlast his fear, perhaps even his lifetime. Not a sanctuary built of walls and signs, but of trust, patience, and the shared courage to remain open. The realization did not overwhelm him. It steadied him. He knew there would be hard days ahead, setbacks, storms, moments when the old doubts returned. But he also knew he would not face them alone. The bond that had begun in cold water and desperation had grown into a living network of care, stretching outward in ways he could never fully see. As dusk settled and the first stars appeared, the horse lifted her head, ears forward, alert to the quiet hum of the land. The rancher followed her gaze, feeling a sense of alignment settle into place. This was not an ending. It was a shaping of a legacy, slow and deliberate, built not through grand intention, but through presence. And as he stood there, rooted and unafraid, he understood that saving one life had opened the door to many more, including his own. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you don't miss more healing stories like this. And now, click on the video on your screen. The next story might make you cry and then help you feel whole again.